Dorothea Puente murdered 9 people, Omara told jurors after the grim photo exhibition. Don't turn your back on reason. The prosecution's main weakness was the fact that there were no eyewitnesses to the alleged murders. The prosecution could only prove the cause of death in the case of Ruth Monroe, the other bodies were too decayed. But one thing toxicology tests did reveal, however, was that there were traces of Dalmane, flurazepam, a prescription-strength sleeping pill, in all the remains. Dalmane can be lethal, especially when taken with alcohol or other sedatives, and it's particularly potent in elderly people, experts testified. At Puente's preliminary hearing, a doctor testified that Puente had used Dorothy Miller's veteran ID card to try to get a prescription for Dalmane, which the doctor refused to give her. The Dalmane evidence was backed up by testimony about boarders who complained that Puente foisted medication on them. Puente had abundant sources for the drug, Wood writes. In addition to the Dalmane she acquired from her court-appointed psychiatrist, she got it from 2 other doctors as well. Former resident Carol Durning, who lived at the rooming house for the first half of 1987 before she was evicted, testified that she'd overheard Puente telling James Gallup he had to leave unless he let her take charge of his money. He later complained that Puente was giving him drugs that made him sleep all the time, she added, according to the B. Alvaro Bert Montoya complained to an employee of a local detox center where he resided before transferring to 1426 F Street that Puente was giving him a medicine he didn't like to take, according to the B. When that employee, William Johnson, confronted Puente about the matter, she flew into a rage and asked him to take Montoya back to the detox center to live if he was going to meddle in her business. Johnson advised Montoya that he'd be better off at the boarding house than at the center. I told him, "You'll be safe here," Johnson told the court. "I was wrong. I've got to live with this for the rest of my life." Puente went to elaborate lengths to cover up Montoya's death. She paid Donald Anthony, a local halfway house resident, to help her flush out her story. Anthony called Montoya's social worker, posing as his brother-in-law, told her that Montoya had gone to live with his family out of state. But in a message left on the social worker's answering machine, Anthony mistakenly used his own name instead of the brother-in-law's, the blunder which prompted Detective Cabrera's visit to the boarding house, and the subsequent excavation of the yard. A handwriting expert confirmed that Puente had signed the names of 7 dead tenants on 60 federal and state checks that were sent to 1426 F Street in 1987 and 1988, Sacramento Bee reported. She was making $5,000 a month from the forgeries. The prosecution decided not to charge Puente with forgery, saying they thought the additional charge would make the case too complex for jurors. Her defense attorney Kevin Climo conceded that Puente had a touch of larceny in her heart, but insisted that, it doesn't make her a killer, it doesn't make her an evil, serial killer. The prosecution brought forth witnesses to refute this argument, including the handyman Puente hired to build Everson Gilmouth's coffin. He told the court that he'd helped her dump Gilmouth's body by the Sacramento River. Authorities were not able to file charges against him because the statute of limitations on the crime had expired, but his testimony gave jurors a glimpse into Puente's frigid heart. Former residents also came forward. Homer Myers, who lived at Puente's place for 2 years after she found him in a bar, said he unwittingly dug some of the tenants' graves, according to the Los Angeles Times. Puente told him to dig a 4-foot hole for a small apricot tree, and he wondered why she'd wanted it so deep. Things got rough when he refused to sign documents empowering the mistress of the house to cash his Social Security checks. "I just never signed them," he told the paper. "I just passed it off." His refusal may have saved his life. 6 years after the bodies were discovered in Puente's yard, 6 jurors traveled to Sacramento to visit the crime scenes they'd only known from pictures or verbal descriptions during the trial, the Sacramento Bee reported. They sat in the dive bars where she trolled for victims, toured the narrow rooms of the Victorian home where several boarders were given sleeping pill cocktails before they slowly slipped from unconsciousness to death, and walked over the garden where Puente had planted flowers over their corpses. Dusk was spreading gloomily over the backyard when juror Joe Martin rushed back into the house, visibly shaken. "You can't see much back there," he told the paper. "But you feel a lot. It's weird." After a year of weighing the testimony, the jury found Puente guilty of murdering Dorothy Miller, Benjamin Fink and Leona Carpenter. But the jury couldn't reach a verdict on the 6 other murder charges, and Superior Court Judge Michael Verga declared a mistrial on those counts, according to the Los Angeles Times. There was no explanation why the jury found Puente guilty on the 3 counts but could not reach an agreement on the other charges, which were similar. Puente showed no emotion when the verdict was read. On December 10, 1993, Verga sentenced Puente to prison for life without the possibility of parole. Puente was 64 when she was sent to Central California Women's Facility near Chowchilla, the largest women's prison in the country.